Guys are ready? Ashley, you can go ahead and get started whenever you're ready. So if you want to take a second, you can. But whenever you're ready to start, we can go ahead.
Ready, set. Hi, and welcome to our MBC Life podcast. We're here live at Infinite Shrink, and I have the amazing Dr. Lustberg here with me today. I had the pleasure of interviewing her earlier today, and we discussed the panel. And I was just wondering, what are some keynotes that you'd like to share with those that weren't here?
Yeah, it was, we did a joint session together talking about how to advocate yourself in a complex system, and I think that a lot of the key takeaways are to speak up and really voice your preferences. It can be sometimes challenging, we all know that, but it's really, what I've learned over almost 2 decades of being an oncologist is that preferences vary so widely among the different patients that I've treated, and I think if we can bring anything back to the audience listening in is that a good healthcare team would want to know your preferences, and it's really important to speak up.
Yes, and I love that. And we also discussed on that session when we were talking about preference, how communication is key. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't matter if you feel like it's going to be offensive or anything else. Make sure you speak on what's on your heart and be completely honest, because as an oncologist, you know more than most that, like, sometimes we have side effects that are just nervous and bring it up or anything else, right. But if we don't bring them up, then you aren't able to help us.
Exactly, and I think, their patients sometimes have had experiences where, they have voiced a side effect or a toxicity, and maybe it's been dismissed or not taken seriously, and I think we're both here to say that really that's not something that's acceptable. So if your team is not hearing your concerns, I think there will be additional healthcare settings which may be open to it. So just know that that's absolutely you're right, and that unusual side effects that were not reported in original clinical trial results absolutely become more apparent, and that as a unique individual you may have your own very unique experiences.
I love that. And since you just brought up clinical trials, our conversation earlier, they kind of got cut off because we were just doing so well, and the crowd was participating, so it was a really good discussion. But you brought up clinical trials, and I'd like to go back to that momentarily. What would you say to those who believe that clinical trials are like testing on you?
So I think it's important to first acknowledge that clinical trials have led to our current standard of care treatments. So really any advance that we have today for breast cancer as well as other cancers really started out as a clinical trial. And so what I tell my patients is that every juncture it's really important to evaluate what all your options are. And the option may be a standard of care treatment, and you can kind of derive the benefit from the individuals who participated in clinical trials before you and made the standard of care treatment, or it might actually make sense to then compare the existing standard of care treatments to something that might be better. And so a lot of our new investigational drugs are the latest scientific advances in therapeutics. So the participation in clinical trials gives you access to the latest possibilities. So I do see it as an opportunity to explore all options. You're not going to be given an inferior treatment. There's never going to be any clinical trial that's currently approved in cancer where it would be permissible to give you no treatment.
Exactly.
But I know that's a fear, so it's important to ask the question.
Yeah.
Say, if I do end up not getting the investigational agent, can you tell me if the treatment that I would receive is currently considered acceptable or a standard of care? And it's important to ask.
Yeah, and I love that you said that as well, because it's so important. When I first got diagnosed, I wasn't really told about clinical trials, so I think it's so important that we're bringing this to the table and just discussing it, because there's so many options out there for all of us. So it's important to check to see what would work and have that open-minded communication again with our oncologists. During our talk, we were unable to talk about pathology.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're so passionate about that. Can you tell me why?
So the idea that breast cancer is one disease has absolutely been debunked, thankfully. And so we really see multiple subsets of breast cancer, you, then that's a red flag, honestly. But really, I think it's important to have a copy of your pathology report or know where to find it in the portal, and to ask questions about it, because there is a lot of information on what is potentially driving the cancer, what the potential targeted therapies are for that. And the second point that we didn't get to is that cancers can change over time.
Yes.
So what may have been your initial pathology, let's say 5 years ago, may have changed. So we know that biological drivers can change over time, and they can be new drivers of the breast cancer that are acquired. So I think good questions to ask are, you know, what type of breast cancer do I have? Do we need to do another type of biopsy at some point later?
Yes.
To understand any changes that have happened, and depending on the patient and the circumstance, that may mean a tissue biopsy, or it may mean a blood test known as a liquid biopsy, where we can kind of identify these new drivers of tumor promotion. So I know for patients who may not have a scientific background, it can be intimidating to kind of review these reports, but there's actually a lot of help from both your healthcare team, as well as different organizations actually kind of have a lot of information about kind of deciphering these reports. This is not meant to stress you out, but I think if over time you can become a little bit more familiar with the type of breast cancer that you have, I think it would be super important as you kind of navigate treatment decisions.
Yes, and what you just said, like, it's not meant to stress you out. It's not another layer to stress you out. It's just something to inform us and to empower us.
Yes.
So we can take that information, read up on it, and then ask the questions. And remember, like, it's not just our oncologists. Like, we work with a whole team of people.
Exactly.
Because our healthcare consists of a team.
Exactly. And these, and not to make light that these oncology visits need to pack a lot of different types of information. And so all of this may not happen in that one visit, but then there is my charts and portals, or discussions with your nurse or nurse practitioner or physician assistant. So lots of people can fill in the blanks. Plus, I really believe in a lot of the online sources and podcasts such as this and others, as well as social media resources that are vetted resources.
Yes.
Which can provide a lot of important education that can be learning out of the oncologist's office.
Yes, because I myself, I'm still continuing to learn. Thankfully, on this podcast, we have some segments where we really dive into research and dive into, like, look, it's up to you. Like, how amazing is this? But I love, just so amazing.
Yes, and just kind of back to pacing yourself. It may be that, when you're very first diagnosed or at a time of an immediate progression, perhaps that's not the right juncture where you could be absorbing this information. But then there are maybe quieter, more slower paced times where that could be a time of learning. Really, there's no one right set way. Kind of back to each person defining for themselves when is the right time to learn, and how to learn. Every one of my patients is a little different.
Exactly, and that's the beauty of taking our healthcare into our own hands.
Yes.
Because we get to drive, and we get to decide exactly what we want from this team, how much we want to know, how much we don't want to know, and have that line of communication once again. And also remember that online, there's so many opportunities to learn, as you mentioned. We have the podcast, we have all these other organizations. If you could say one last thing to our patients, what would you like to send them off with?
So I think there's, so many things I could say, but I think kind of being curious and open to the different avenues of learning and possibility, whether it be learning about your healthcare team and kind of what resources are available, let's say in your home institution where you're getting care, or then learning and being curious about, there's a lot of wonderful national resources out there that I feel like maybe we become so institution centered that we don't talk enough to our patients about all these different wonderful resources that are really available free of charge, and they can be very enriching and enlightening. So I would say that curiosity, to be open to kind of being open to finding that new information, whether it be in a pathology report, a clinical trial, talking to a peer.
Yeah.
Because just talking to kind of somebody who has gone through this, all of that, I think, just by being open, I feel like it can open up new doors.
Great. And then, thank you for saying all that, because peer support has been my saving grace. But I'd like to ask you one more thing, since we're here at Infinite Strength. How long have you been a part of this organization, and like, why do you continue to show up?
Yeah, so I lived in Ohio for a very long time, and then I moved. Yes.
Me too!
Really?
Yes! I have my second thing that loves you.
No, that's where I worked.
Oh my goodness! Okay.
So I was at Ohio State for a very long time, and I had grown up in the DC, Maryland area, so I always wanted to come back to the East Coast area, so I came to Yale almost 3 years ago to lead the breast program here. And as things happened, Roberto Lombardi, who is the founder of Infinite Strength, was one of the first people who reached out to me when I moved into town, telling me about Infinite Strength and invited me to her, annual fundraiser. And so it sort of started there. I showed up, I was curious, and I just really learned about her mission and her passion to help single moms living with metastatic breast cancer and how to support the individual as well as the kids and the caregivers. So I joined the board, and it's just been a very positive synergy as we when I joined, it was a Connecticut-based organization, and now it has gone national.
Let's just give a round of applause for that, because that's a huge accomplishment.
And I think the support of the president and just that whole Moonshot initiative, all of that I think is only making it possible to support more patients and families. So it's really what's been remarkably eye-opening for me is that how just by being a very small organization, she's been able to be very nimble and carry out so much of her goals. So it's been exciting to be a part of that.
I'm really thankful that you're a part of it. But I'm really excited because it was national, and I just saw it on a Facebook page, and I reached out and was like, hey, can I come?
Yes.
She was like, it's a national. Yes, please join us. And then I got to speak with you today. So it's just like, this is only the beginning. This is only the beginning, and we are looking so forward to what else Infinite Strength has to show and who they're going to support. And stick with us, because we'll be interviewing with more. And thank you so much, Dr. Lustberg.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Great.
Yay!
You two were so good.
Yeah, she's so amazing.
Oh, okay, so we're stationed at Red Powder Center.